So for our last session today, our presenter will be Gulshan Yusufzai, the Executive Director of MAS-SSF and one of our co-collaborators for today's workshop, and I'm sure quite a familiar face to you all at this point in the workshop. So she will be presenting on cultural-specific trauma treatment for Afghan refugee children, the peer support program that she has mentioned before. And so join me in welcoming Gulshan again to present.
All right, so 30 more minutes that you have to bear, and then we could go to another. I think we have breakout sessions, right, after this?
Yes.
Yeah. Then you could talk at that point about what you thought about the presentation, and we'd love to hear your input. So yeah, MAS Social Services Foundation, Muslim American Society Social Services. Muslim American Society Social Services Foundation. See, I got it wrong too. It's a very long name, but we're known as MAS-SSF. Hopefully you'll be able to remember that acronym. Okay, so what I'll do is just talk about MAS-SSF a little bit. I've done this a billion times, so I'll try to make it brief. And then specifically talk about peer support and how that is a culturally responsive way to help Afghans. Not just Afghans, actually. It's designed to help all Muslims because the Muslim community, although we have every ethnicity in there, including the LGBT community group, our challenges and so forth are very similar because of our immigrant refugee experience, but also because Islam actually is a way of life. So it's a religion, but it's also a way of life. And so in that way, it connects how we receive support and services in the best way that would help us. So MAS-SSF, our mission, basically, we're a nonprofit that aims to aid Muslim families, but of course, particularly with social services. So we're focusing on the Muslim community because, quite frankly, there is not another entity that focuses at the level that we do. There are many that are upcoming, and that's wonderful, but we really focus on providing culturally, linguistically, religiously competent services. So that way, we can go ahead and help the community with the needs that they have. Our vision is really to have one of these chapters throughout the United States. Currently, this is just a blueprint, and our parent organization, there's 39, I believe, of them throughout the U.S. Why we started MAS-SSF? It started in 2007, and it was started because there was lots and lots of issues, rise in domestic violence, divorces, and so forth. Many problems, parent-children issues, and generation issues, and a lot of our community just didn't have a place to go where they could talk to someone, but also talk in a confidential setting where we have, as well as someone who could speak their language, understand their culture, and so forth, and they could be understood, and people who could actually connect with them on what they've gone through. So that is the reason we started in 2007. It's a very long timeline. We started in 2007. We were volunteer run till about end of 2013 when I was hired as the first staff at 10 hours a week. At that point it was volunteer run, no funding, and we basically started to work towards trying to find funding and develop our programs. And our first program was the Shifa for Today peer support program. Shifa meaning healing. And so we received our first, so my focus was really to develop the infrastructure and programs and train a staff and build our board and really get a team together and an infrastructure that could uphold and stay on forever. My goal and my board's goal is really to have a system after we have left from this world, that there is a system that our children can use. There's a place where they can go and feel comfortable and move towards recovery and healing. So that is what we're working towards. And so I spent about a couple of years on that and then got my first funding from the state in 2016. And this is where really things got launched and we started to go really fast after that. And then we kept on continuing throughout. And then when COVID hit, of course, we did what we could in terms of making everything virtual and making sure that our community can access services virtually. And of course, the Afghan crisis, that was another point where MAS-SSF really was put to the test to be able to respond accordingly. And we did do that. We actually, when the crisis happened, I had actually been following all the whole agreement that was going on with the US and at Qatar and so forth. And eventually, you could kind of see what was progressing, although people were not paying attention. And then when it did collapse, we did respond by making sure we hold live stream Facebook events and webinars. We're not a legal entity, but my hope was if we could just provide a platform where our community can just talk about what they're going through, it would at least be the first step towards healing. And so we did do that. We had, I think, over 2,000 from here and Afghanistan attend. And so we've grown a lot from 2020 to now, actually double. We've doubled up. In terms of our team of experts, I have staff, 15 staff, so I grew from 1 10-hour staff myself to 15 staff. We have about, I believe, 7 consultants, 7 to 10. I'm remembering exactly the amount. Our board of directors as well, we have about 6 people on there that are from the community. We've trained from 2016 to now 91 community members who have become now certified peer specialists. These peer specialists are Arabs, Pakistanis, Indians, and Afghans. And they range from individuals who have come recently to those who have been here 30 plus years. I think the youngest we have is about 17, and the wisest and most experienced we have, I'm trying not to use the word old here, is about 75. So we have all kinds of individuals from all walks of life. And of course, we have our youth, about 15 youth that are working with us, and our volunteers. I'm mentioning this very specifically because all of our individuals that are with us, they have gone through what we're trying to do here. They've been a refugee, they've been an immigrant, they've gone through some form of trauma, which is why they continue to connect and work with MAS-SSF, whether paid or unpaid. And most of our people have been unpaid until more recently, so it's been really wonderful to see how much passion there is. The programs we have a few components. The prevention and early intervention, specifically because what we're trying to do is the Afghans that have come in, because they've endured so much trauma in the last 40 years, and especially in the last 20 years, we want to be able to tap into and support them so that way, wherever they are, they're not getting more unwell and eventually becoming clinically ill. So all our programs have a prevention and early intervention component. Prevention being our community education workshops that I'll talk about a little bit. Early intervention being our direct peer support service, as well as our other services. All programs that we have are offered in 5 languages. That's English and the 2 Afghan languages, which is Dari and Pashto, Arabic, and then Urdu as well for the Pakistani Indian community. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. And of course, everyone has lived experience, so we do come from that space where we know what we've been through and we develop accordingly. And culture competence, huge component of our programs because we represent a majority of the 14 to 20 Arab countries, the Afghan community, Iranian community, Indian, Pakistani community, and much, much more. So certainly have a high number of individuals who are from the various backgrounds. And then linguistic competency, like I said, 5 languages, but even more than that. We focus on the 5 because those are the highest population in Sacramento. Programs, we have many. So we actually went from 1 program to about 9 programs, and I say about 9 programs because 1 just ended within 2 years. The Shifa for today, peer support, is our peer support program, which I'll go into more depth in a little bit, but we also relaunched our clinical counseling program. And recently, where I've hired a therapist. We're also looking forward to possibly getting a therapist that has a background in the community and in the religion as well, to be able to respond to those who would want that type of service. Omid for Afghans, this is where we do case management referrals, and as well as the previous services we have for Afghans. That's a new program we have in response to the Afghan crisis. Al-Afia for seniors. Al-Afia means wellness for seniors. Again, PEI focus. So we have educational events and fun events for them. And we just had one this past Saturday And it's actually the most fun program we have because by the time you become a senior, you don't care what you're doing. So we play all kinds of games, and we also bring experts to talk to them in terms of the challenges they're going through. And the goal of that program is to prevent depression and isolation and everything that has to do with aging. Youth peer support services, we have about 2.5, and I say that because our youth advocacy program is very small. This is where we've selected 8 youth. We've trained them to get up in front of decision makers like the state, city, and so forth, and talk about what they've gone through to be able to create system change and affect policy. And then Amala Youth Line is our warm line, open 6 nights a week, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. This is where we've trained volunteer youth to talk to other youth when they call and they're going to challenges. So this is a warm line, and it provides peer support. Shifa for the Future is just a new program we just started where we are training youth for the next 3 years in becoming peer specialists and be able to provide counseling and peer support to the youth. Community education, another big program. The goal is basically to reduce stigma, to educate the community about why it's important to seek services and why to seek it early on, and that it's okay to seek services. I think Masood earlier stated in response to Kaban's presentation, there's a lot of stigma in accessing services. It's already in the United States, but imagine from a country where you cannot. If you were to talk about or access services, there's lots and lots of stigma that you'll face. COVID vaccine awareness, we had that program, but it concluded, thank God. And then Amana House is a shelter, the first domestic violence shelter that are designed for Muslim women. Although it is open to all. But since there was no such shelter in Sacramento, MAS-SSF in partnership with my sister's house and 3 other entities got together and opened the first shelter as of last year. And then, of course, resource and referrals. So this is as basic as this might be and as needed it might be. I want to just mention that MAS-SSF is trusted and connected to all the mosques, almost every mosque that there is in Sacramento and surrounding county. So we have the trust of the community, but we're also connected to the government's county and state entities. So we never turn away anybody that calls us. We always make sure if we cannot help them with one of these programs, we'll make sure that we refer them to somebody who can. Although, it might not be very culturally competent, but we do. The great thing is my staff is able to do the interpretation, do the translation, and find out of the program and give back to the client and do that warm handout, that culturally competent warm handoff to help the individual in need. Okay, like I said, all 5 programs are offered in 5 languages, except we have one training, the mental health first aid training, which is not ours. We do offer it, but it's in English only. With that exception, pretty much everything we can offer in 5 languages. Just want to mention this. There's a California Reducing Disparities project that has been going on since 2009. To make it quite simple, it's basically a focus on the underserved communities and developing and defining a community-based practice to help those communities. Majority of underserved communities that exist in the U.S. did not have a practice to be able to help them to access services. And so Office of Health Equity developed this program, and it's the first of its kind in the United States. And so we're one of the grantees. And so it started in 2009 and then went into, and recently just got extended for another 4 years. So this is a project that we're part of, and all of this focus so this is where the peer support program comes, because we approach Department of Public Health to say what works for our community is a peer support response. Clinical is important for those community members that need it, absolutely. But a majority of our community fall in that bracket where they've endured so much trauma that right now they just need someone to trust, someone who could talk to them, walk the walk, and be able to respond and connect with them, develop that relationship, and then that way it opens it up, and they start the healing process. So we have developed a community-defined practice called peer support. And that is our Shifa for Today peer support program. And again, Shifa means healing in Arabic. I think in Farsi as well, but certainly in Arabic. So officially, it's an early intervention program that aims to reduce trauma, anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts among the Muslim community. And what we've done is basically we have an evaluation focus since 2016 to be able to basically have peer supporters in the workforce to be able to provide the services we need to the community. We've also increased access and utilization of mental health services, and also incorporating psychoeducation and traditional spiritual and religious Islamic content and practice. So all of these components are within all the programs I just mentioned. Increasing social support, decreasing psychological distress, and of course using cultural, linguistic, and spiritual religious approaches aligned with the person, which in peer support is called the client or consumer. So what is a peer support specialist? According to SAMHSA, it is peer support workers are people who have been successful in the recovery process, who help others experiencing similar situations through shared understanding, respect, and mutual empowerment. I personally believe that every person is a client. There's no one in this world who has not gone through challenges and trauma and have endured some pain. The way that peer support has traditionally been defined is very different than how the Afghan community sees it. So generally peer support, since the start of it in the 60s and as it moved forward, it focused on, well, you can get up and talk about what you've gone through if there's been a major challenge. It's not the same for the Afghan community. It's very hard for us to even get up and talk about anything that will put a slight tint of stigma or discrimination upon what we're going through. So MAS-SSF actually has developed the first peer support, culturally, linguistically competent peer support program in the United States. So it's the first of its kind. And we've also developed a training to be able to teach service providers as well as community members how to work with the Muslim community, and as well as including Afghans, of course. So why peer support? When people have experienced a trauma, of course, you generally feel like no one understands you. And so for this reason, this brings you loneliness and as well as isolation. And so generally peer supporters are those who could connect with you on that level because they've gone through that. And especially when you start to disengage from the community. And so our peer supporters are trained to first talk about, they're trained to basically connect with the client, with the community, to be able to just discuss what's happening. And their goal is not to tell them what to do. And this is the major difference between clinical and peer support, or advise them or recommend. The goal is to listen and engage and then empower them to be able to solve their own challenges. What happens sometimes when we've all experienced this is when you tell someone what to do, then that burden is on you, right? Okay, you should do this, you should exercise, you should talk to your family. We don't do that. Peer supporters are discouraged from telling clients what to do, but instead talk to them about what's happening and have them come up with what's possible. So generally our peer supporters in the first session will create a plan for them in terms of moving towards healing and recovery. And then each time they visit this, and so our peer supporters also go trained in RAP to be able to create a plan on how to achieve that recovery process. So, and of course all our peer supporters are from the community, and sometimes that creates a problem because everybody knows each other. So this is why we keep on recruiting so many community members. When a community member calls us, we want them to pick who they want to talk to. So if you're an Afghan, which commonly happens, you probably don't want to talk to an Afghan if you speak English. because you're afraid that it might get out there. But if you don't, then you have the option of picking an Afghan peer specialist. Same with Arab and Pakistani and Indian communities. So they are from the community, so there's a plus in that they can provide a lot of lived experience and connection. But of course, we give the community member who's in need the option to choose who they want to talk to. And of course, they share similar experiences, as well as being a refugee or an immigrant, and it's having them understand what they've gone through. It's the most important part of this whole thing. So majority of the times when we have community members call us, even if they need clinical support, they do ask for peer support first. And so now the mental health field is moving into this integrated model where we have peer supporters talk to the clients first, and then eventually when they develop that trust and connection, then they start to talk about what's going on. And at that point, we connect them to clinical support. And since we've relaunched our clinical program, we're able to do that. But of course, it's brand new. So when we don't have the capacity, since it's brand new, we definitely have individuals in the community that we could refer out. Okay. And within, let me do a time check. Do I really have 2 minutes? Just 2 minutes? All right. So within the peers, so part of peer support is working within a trauma-informed context, and that requires the use of peer support. And I forget the presentation before, Koban's presentation was talking about this and how this is needed in order to be able to deliver services that are not only safe but culturally competent. So peer support definitely instills that. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we did develop and copyrighted a training that is now about 32 to 40 hours, and it's called Shifa. So our program is called Shifa for today, but the training is called just Shifa. And so let me move into that quickly. And what we do first is we walk you through the concept of peer support, in terms of what that is, if you were to take this. And then we have, we align, connected to the values that's within Islam, like choice, empowerment, and we make sure that you're able to understand the Islamic perspective, since majority of Afghans, as well as other ethnicities, come from the same religion. We also go into the backgrounds of different cultures. So let's say if we have an Afghan peer specialist, we want them, and if they're seeing an Arab client, we want them to understand the culture, because it's generally assumed that everybody's Arab and everybody's Muslim, and there's no clarity about which one's the culture, which one's the religion. So we want to make sure that our peer specialists are also trained in a cultural competent way to respond to the needs of the client. And then, of course, we also have them understand trauma-informed care, how to work with refugees and the LGBT community, and since we serve all. And then, like I said earlier, we have added a new module, which is Module 5, and it's not listed here. It's for how to work with youth. Okay, I'm going to just skip this. So just testimonials from some of our peer specialists. Have Warsan Ali, who's a Somalian youth, and she was a longtime youth and with us, and she has, in terms of her testimonial, she informed us that it's MAS-SSF is so important to me because I was able to directly work with and build up the community that I love and grew up in. Heba Eladli is one of our peer specialists. She is Egyptian, and in terms of her work, she works with Egyptian or Arab families overall, as well as leading our Amana house. And generally, our focus at MAS-SSF is to keep families together. So with all the programs we have designed, all of them are what has one focus, and so this is why we touch into youth, senior, as well as all age groups. Then we have a senior, Mukhtar Hussein. We're able to get together and share the bonds of brotherhood. We're just like family members. So he's from the Alafia program. And then we have Basit, who's a youth advocate and also staff, who has been with us for a while. And then lastly, community education. I'm gonna quickly say a few words on this because this is the part where in order to access support and services at MAS-SSF, we are constantly trying to educate the community about why it's important to seek services, that it's okay. So we have developed many workshops, and they are offered to anyone who would like to have them for their staff or as well as for their community that they're serving. These include, and there's a long list, parenting children, teenagers, bullying workshop, how to seek services, like I said, mental health first training, and also we had a series of workshops on for Afghans on how to adapt to life in the United States. As I mentioned earlier, I think it's very important to try to understand the collective society and the individual here to be able to serve not only the parents but also the children, so you could respond accordingly when it comes to their needs. But our community education program goal is to educate but also reduce stigma and hopefully to reduce disparities. Majority of the time, we have to offer lots of incentives to get individuals to come here to these workshops. Of course, as a refugee, your first goal is not to go to workshops and get educated. Your first goal is to survive and be able to thrive in the U.S. and find your way. But we hope that as we provide these community programs, they'll be able to understand the importance of seeking services and seeking services early on. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Gulshan, for being a strong voice for the community. And one thing about MAS-SSF is that MAS-SSF is not going to the community, but MAS-SSF is already in the community. And one other thing I want to highlight about the peer support and this community work is that in the class of comparative health system, what we teach is to compare the healthcare system of different countries. Some countries have a lot of staff in the community, and versus other countries have a lot of personnel like mental health nurse, mental health doctor. But which one do good? Which country do better? In fact, the countries which has a lot of community work, and the reason is that when someone need a mental health support from a psychiatrist, that's already late. That's too late. So we need a lot of work in the community, and we are very proud of Gulshan and her team and everything they do at the community. So with that, just a quick comment. Maybe we have one question or something to, maybe one question. Yeah, Huban, please.
Hey, Gulshan. Thanks for the presentation. We talked a little bit about the importance of scholarship and actually writing up and getting data out there about the Afghan community and some of these types of programs. Do you have an evaluation process for your peer support work? And then are you measuring like the positive outcomes of that work? And are you writing about it so that we can all talk about it and kind of get the word out there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, a requirement of the funding we received from Department of Public Health was to focus on, actually, they recommended, I wanted to focus on outcomes. Okay, so how many cases do we get? Could maybe show us how successful you are in offering our services. But the funding we have and the state evaluation team said, no, first do workforce development. Focus on workforce development and getting that together first, and then you could do outcomes. So anyways, we did do that for 5 years, and we just completed our report. And so it will be released by Office of Health Equity. We're also publishing some articles on the idea that how you could use peer support to really not only serve the community but build an infrastructure such as MAS-SSF. What has happened with us is that when we have community members come to us, first of all, within the Muslim community, there is a requirement to do in kind, right? Charity. So you could do that financially, or you can do that in kind. And so a lot of people, while they might have the funding or the money, they generally prefer in kind. And so they stick with us throughout. So we put them in all our programs, not just our peer support program. So we're publishing an article for how to develop an infrastructure using peer support. And of course, the program that I just mentioned in terms of responding in a culturally competent way. So yes, the answer is yes.